Hi, welcome to On the Line, and I'm your host, Britton NewOne Carter. We'd like to thank you for joining us for our sophomore show. You can follow us on Facebook at On the Line TV show, and also on Twitter, hashtag Watch On the Line. Tonight we have with us two very special guests. We have Miss Della Rucker and also Mr. Otis Stephens. Miss Della Rucker, I'll start with you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being with us tonight. I really appreciate having you here. You don't mind me calling you Della, do you?
Not in the least.
Okay, thank you very much. Tell us about yourself. Who is Della Rucker?
So I have worked, I was trying to think of something funny to say because, you know, it seemed like a good idea, but I think I'll pass on that and get straight here.
Okay.
So I have worked in economic development and city revitalization, urban planning for most of the last 20, 25 years. So I've done some work in historic preservation. I've also, the primary area of work that I've been focused on over the last several years has been on helping local governments and local communities grow their small business base. So from my perspective, it is extremely important for a community to have a good, strong base of locally owned businesses that cover a wide variety of services. And I've worked across a good deal over the U.S.
Right.
And it's pretty consistent that the communities that have that seem to be the most healthy, the most resilient, and the most effective in being able to deal with changes as the life of a community goes on.
Right. I also see that you've written two books, two very interesting books, so I'm told by my producer. Crowdsourcing Wisdom, a guide to doing public meetings that actually make your community better. That sounds great. And also, Local Economy Revolution, what changed and how you can help. Now, just listening to that, one of the things I want to ask you right off the bat is, what's your take on the revitalization in the Over the Rhine area? How did you see that play out?
So it's interesting that you start there. So as I mentioned, I've worked in a lot of different communities. I've worked in wealthy communities. I've worked in pretty disadvantaged communities. And the one thing that I've really come to the conclusion of over the last many years is that I really don't think there's a one-shot solution. So a lot of times communities all over the place and of all sizes got themselves in trouble, and sometimes into very deep trouble over the course of the last 40 or 50 years, because they said, we just have to do this one thing and that's going to make everything better. We just have to build this or build that or make that happen, and then all our problems will be solved. The real answer for communities, unfortunately, is a whole lot more complex. And so, because it's complex, because you need a variety of business types, a variety of residents, a variety of activities, those are the places that are the most resilient and the healthiest all over the country. It's hard to build that. And in communities where that fabric was so desperately destroyed, and Over the Rhine is not by any means the only community in greater Cincinnati that we would say that about, rebuilding that is a long and complex and difficult process, and it's bumpy. So while there have been benefits that have come out of the revitalization of Over the Rhine, the developments in Avondale, the improvements in Madisonville, you know, we've seen that in many, many communities. But even in the places where some improvements have been made, that's not a time to rest on the laurels. That's not a time, we're not done by any stretch of the imagination. There's still far, far, far too many people who are left out of that growth and that vitality. And it's not until it's able to really incorporate a broad section of the community, not just be appealing to one population or another population, that you really have a place that you can say belongs to the community and is a place that makes the community around it better.
Right. So what would you say to the so many that have been disenfranchised as a result of the construction that's going on in Over the Rhine and other such areas? What would you say to those people that have been displaced?
I have found that myself personally, I really can't have anything to say. I've listened, I've sympathized to the greatest extent I can. There's not an easy answer to give people. And I haven't stood in their shoes.
Right.
So I can't be the one to say, well, you should do this or you should do that. I have worked with a lot of communities where the focus has been on trying to find a collaborative way forward. And that crowdsourcing wisdom book that you mentioned,
Right.
That was written for predominantly people who run city meetings. But the purpose of writing it was to say that the way we've been doing these things, the way we have been failing to include the full cross-section of the residents of a community, has been creating all of these ill effects. The
Right.
distrust, the disenfranchisement, the disassociation. And I think a crucial element, if we're going to truly and honestly address those needs, is to make certain that we're really listening, and not just listening, but co-creating solutions, that we're really working hand in hand with the people who live in a community, who care about a community, who have invested in the community, to find the best possible way forward. That might not mean that there's a perfect answer out there, but it does mean that that's the best chance we have of really leveraging everybody's wisdom
Yeah.
to bring to that.
Yeah, that's great. And that's putting it on the line. Let me back up just a little bit
Yes, sir.
and ask you, what led you to Cincinnati? Because I know you're not originally from here, so what led you to Cincinnati?
I am not. I'm originally from a little town outside of Cleveland. Growing up, I grew up in very much a Rust Belt environment. So my father and my grandfather had a little paint factory. The paint factory went out of business in the early 80s, so that was right when a lot of things were collapsing in Cleveland. So I got to see a lot of kind of that change from the industrial
Right.
economy to where we are now, sort of firsthand, and rather in my face. I ended up going to college. I was very, very fortunate. I was able to go to college in Chicago.
Okay.
After college, spent several years in northern Wisconsin, and then my husband's with P&G. So
Okay.
we it was either come to Cincinnati or go to some place that was not really where we wanted to be. Cincinnati was very appealing to us because we could be closer to our families. My husband is from Detroit.
Oh.
We ended up here. I went back and did a graduate degree in urban planning, and we've been here now almost 20 years. So it's a community that we've really come to love and really been invested in a way that I don't think I ever expected when we first came to town. Both my kids were born here. I guess we're Cincinnatians now.
Okay, great. We're glad to have you. How would you rate the progress here in Cincinnati?
You know, Cincinnati is to me really fascinating, especially coming from Cleveland, much more of a stereotypical Rust Belt town. If you're looking at a Detroit or a Cleveland or Gary or Milwaukee, you see cities by and large. So for the whole city, you see some great growth. You know, there was a definite heyday in the 50s and 60s, and you've seen a very, in all respects, a very tough times since then. So the high to the low has been pretty pronounced. Cincinnati, because of its economy, because of its economic mix, has been interesting to me because it doesn't have that history of big highs and big lows.
Right,
So it's much
right.
more stable.
Yeah.
And that's got, again, pros and cons. It's nice not to, have to smash into the basement on a regular basis.
Right.
But when you have smashed into the basement, you become very conscious that you have to try to change things and change things very aggressively. So, that's not something that Cincinnati has hit in the same way
Right.
as some other cities. So,
Right.
so there's some differences in approach there.
Right. So, on that same topic, what are some of the key projects that had the most impact here in our city, from your perspective?
Oh, boy, that's a hard question. So there's been projects that have had impact on sort of public perception. And those are, sort of the marquee projects that hit the newspapers, and, we build a big building that has a crown on it, and,
Right.
that's very highly visible. One of the things that I think has been really extraordinary, and Cincinnati is actually stronger in this than a lot of cities, has been the development of the community development corporations. This
Okay.
extraordinarily rich body of community-based organizations that foster and enable and create development within that is at the scale of the neighborhood, that meets the needs of the neighborhood, that does the work in the neighborhood. And those aren't the things that make the paper,
Okay.
but those are the projects very consistently. I'm not going to come up with names at the moment, but if you go to Avondale, you go to Madisonville, you go to pretty much many of the neighborhoods, you'll find those projects. And for the people in that community, that project made a big change in their perception
Okay.
of themselves and their community.
Great. Great. I'm going to come back to you. I
Yes,
want to
sir.
bring Mr. Stephens into the conversation. And when I come back to you, I want you to talk a little bit about your family and growing up in Cleveland.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Otis Stephens. How you doing, Big O?
Great.
Great. And
Great
welcome
be
to
here.
On the Line. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
On the Line. Glad to have you. For you, how do you think our city can improve on its status in order to be more competitive?
Good question. When you talk about being more competitive, of course, we're talking about in the age of technology. We can also look at it from a perspective of creating income growth. And you ask, how do you do that? I'm located over the Rhine. We have a high unemployment rate. Even with the development that has taken place of the buildings, not as much has been done in way of developing the local population. Our unemployment rate over the Rhine still is around 40%. It's very high. Though we have a lot more boutique stores,
Right.
a lot more boutique restaurants, we lost a lot of the small businesses that were creating jobs. Ross Hardware, Cincinnati
Right.
Color Paint Store, the little plumbing and electrical vendors that were down there. They were hired from the community. Even Findlay Market would hire a lot of young men that would find work, over 3-4 days in Findlay Market. Help selling vegetables and fruits, of course. That has all disappeared because it has become more, streamlined, and that there's not enough growth or to sustain the community as it once was. Because sustainability is important in the community, and you ask, how do you do that? And what is the role of our government and our governing body to bridge that gap, to create the opportunity, sustainability? You got, what, $300 million been spent in over the Rhine. No way that 300 million should be spent on over the Rhine.
That's right.
2 billion should be spent on the banks, and unemployment still 30-40%. You know, and as Della said, it's multifaceted in order to solve it. And you ask the question, whose responsibility is it to solve? Is it the entrepreneur? Is it the business owners that open up these boutique shops, or is it, you know, because you know we're business people, you know, or is it our government? I think we all have a vested interest in solving the problem, right? But we have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
It exists, you know. I mean, because the evidence show it exists. There's no way you have the discretionary gap in spending and income that you see in over the Rhine, you see in the other parts of the city as well, and you know, low ownership, right, from African Americans owning businesses in the modern time that is today, and is not be a problem. Something's taking place, and it has to be addressed. So, in order for it to happen, you have to acknowledge it exists, which no one wants to. Everybody has. You say, oh, you know, where is it at? Yeah, we know it exists, but it's not here.
Right.
You know, and so you have to do that, and you have to take the necessary risks, right? And we have this new thing going with parking. Parking's a big issue, you know. Okay, we're building all these parking garages. You know, of course, these parking garages has to have people park in them, so you have to restrict the parking on the street, so you have to raise the parking on the street, and now you squeeze in the community who can't afford to pay high parking fees, and all this has been being done under the guise of creating paying down debt that has been incurred by 3CDC and other developers. So where it goes back to the community councils, you know. How do the community councils have a voice in the decision making? How does the residents really have a voice in the decision making process? It's not all cookie cutter, you know. It's not all okay, you know, because everything sounds good. We're gonna generate money, right? Sounds good. Let's generate money. Hey, it's good. You know, it's mark of success in the capitalist society. In our republic, we believe in success is if you're making money. Okay, so but where do you make the money at? You make the money on the back of the poor. How do you make the money? I find that it's difficult for the individual, but our government, we have all these studies. You know, we started off with the ULI study. Della mentioned a study or two earlier with me. We have all these studies and these think tanks, and they come in and figure out what to do. Right. And it does nothing for the residents. The number one thing that I think that would help, if we can set aside a right to work district in over the Rhine. We say, okay, you want TIF financing, you want new market tax credits, you want housing tax credits, okay, you want historical tax credits, right? The cost per square foot to do development is sky high and over the Rhine, okay? So we know it's a lot of fat, okay? So if you want these monies, we can get you these monies, right? If you can guarantee us that we'll have a certain percentage of employment from the community, and that goes for Walnut Hills, goes for Avondale, it goes for Coreyville, goes for any of these areas that are using taxpayer dollars. So when you use taxpayer dollars, you can't give me the excuse that you can't find or you can't help bridge this gap. You know, that's what they're doing. They're taking taxpayers' dollars, they're using it for development, they do the development. Most of the contractors are from out of this area. Most of the contractors are not here. So those monies, right, leaves the city. They don't come back. They leave the city. So we're actually funding other municipalities, other cities through the work that's going on here, and it's not benefiting the residents, nor actually the community. And over the long haul, it hurts the city, right? Because we move. You're living over the Rhine. You're moving over the Rhine. You still got to walk down the street. You got 4 guys asking you, can they get 50 cents? So you have to change it. Yeah, and it's a responsibility of those who take our tax dollars. I'm not against private developers coming in on their own dime, doing their own development, because I believe in America. We're right to that. Right. But when you start taking our dollars, you start taking the taxpayers' dollars, you have a responsibility, because those are resources that could be used in order to shrink that income gap, to create housing, to create sustainability. You take our dollars, you have a responsibility to us. And that's what I see our governing body, and being frank, we have a predominantly African American community council. City council. We've had a strong mayor, right? And our condition continues to deteriorate. The spalding continues. We have to do more, and the time is now. Cincinnati, we have a great opportunity in the city. I always said this, even going back, with Buddy Gray. We would do a lot of talking about, how do we make a vibrant community? How do we blend it together? Because it has to be. Right. We can't build more prisons. You can't do more of this, do that. Come on, we got to, we got to get off the milk. Let's get to the meat. That's right. Right. And so how does this happen? So we have a great opportunity. We went out to San Francisco, all the pretty buildings, but rent's sky high. So how we have the same type of stock of resources. Our buildings, same buildings that I climbed up on and painted the cornices for slumlords for $10. I remember the very first building that I worked on. I was walking downtown and the guy was tearing down a building. I went over to help him stack bricks. They gave me a Coke, a ham sandwich, and a bag of chips. I said, "Boy, this is the life."
Let's hold it right there for a second, because I need and that's fine. Yeah. But you touched on something really profound. I should have went here first. Let's start with your beginnings. Tell us about who Otis is, where you came from, your humble beginnings, because you got a unique story, and I like to take our audience back to your beginnings. You're a minority business here, and I've read at your bio, and I understand that you've been all over the United States, and your company has done some great work. Can you talk about that?
I've done some projects. I'm not great there, but I've done some projects. My family, my sisters, 3 girls and 5 boys. We are originally from Commonwealth. At age 13, we moved over the Rhine, up on Dandridge, and that was the street right behind the Shillitoe's warehouse there. Right. Matter of fact, on the corner there, that would be the northeast corner of where Kroger's actually started at. But at any rate, we moved there, and I was in school. I was playing in the band, out of marching band, out of all this stuff. And I ended up doing construction because, like I said, I walked downtown one day and I was, looking for something to do, and they were demolishing a building, and I jumped in, helped stack bricks. And as I said earlier, I got a soda pop, a ham sandwich, and a bag of chips. And I said, oh boy, this is the life for me, and and I guess that's when my career started. Before coming to Over the Rhine was Millville. We had yards, and I would, cut grass, and I would hire a person to kind of help me cut the grass, right? And I guess that was my first entrepreneur experience. I didn't know that's what I was, an entrepreneur at the time. I just wanted to play baseball and needed somebody to cut the grass, Miss Mildred Grass that day while I was playing baseball. I'd give them a few quarters and they cut the grass. Right. We pushed mowers back then. So, I ended up, Western Hills High School, and I worked up in the area with a development company. It's called Queen City Development, the Toon Brothers. And they taught me a lot about it, and I would, get out of school and go work there. And of course, it evolved got into Over the Rhine, would do work, odd jobs from whomever would want to hire me. Andrew Wolf used to play for the symphony.
Right.
up on
What about Cargill? Did you-
14.
Yeah.
I didn't. Cargill was way bigger than me. Yeah, I was
Right.
like a
Right.
dream.
Right.
Uh,
And just mentioning his name, you know, and we've got such a short time, and I want to ask you this question: what's your perception on the history of the banks? Real quickly,
I know we don't have time for these long
Yeah.
dialogues, but
Yeah,
I got
right.
we say start from the beginning. I got to
Yeah, I know you
but,
did.
we look at the banks. We look at you talking about the banks project or the banking.
The banks prior to.
Okay, the banks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, you had Catherine Zorro. You had a lot of businesses that were down on the banks, and of course, those businesses moved, and the area started to die down, and the city found himself with a large tract of property that needed developed. And they put out requests for proposals to a lot of different players, and none of those proposals were accepted. The county jumped in and said, "Nah, we're going to spearhead this." At that time, the ULI study was about going on. That was the Urban Land Institute. Ralph Porter came to town, and we had what you call marathon meetings. With the ULI, Ralph Porter, myself, Tom Williams, Mike Stout, Mark Bruner, all the players. It was Eddie Hingston, Buddy Gray, and we had these meetings, and these meetings were negotiating for what amount of housing should stay, what amount of affordable housing, and what market rate, and that was the big divide there. And we set up quadrants to do the study. We had way of life, economic development. We had these groups, and we met. It was a lot of stakeholders, and we battled. As a result of that, out of that came 3CDC, and 3CDC originally thought they were going to go to the banks and do the banks, but the county said, nah, we're going to handle this. So of course that's forced 3CDC to go north to over the Rhine. They come over the Rhine, and boom, there you have it.
Right. Well, it's been an interesting show tonight, and we're so short on time. Della, I'd like to invite you back. I want to hear more of your story. I know you have a story that deals with the early days in Cleveland and the theater. I'm also a member of the theater myself. Otis, I'd like to bring you back as well. I know we can gain a lot of information from you. I would love to. We want to thank you both our guests, for being here tonight on the line. We look for you to come back again in the future, and we look for our guests to stay tuned for the shows that follow. We'll be back here next week at the same place, the same time, and we look for you on the line.